Novo dia. Mesmos papos, mesmas coisas, mesmos programas, mesmos lugares, mesmos passeios. Novo dia. Mesmos papos, mesmas coisas, mesmos programas, mesmos lugares, mesmos passeios. Novo dia. Mesmos papos, mesmas coisas, mesmos programas, mesmos lugares, mesmos passeios. Novo dia. Mesmos papos, coisas, programas, lugares, passeios. Quer um roteiro diferente? O cinema brasileiro tem sempre um filme novo pra você. Tem emoção para todos os gostos, para todos os públicos. Viva o cinema brasileiro!
Olá, boa tarde, sejam muito bem-vindas, bem-vindos, bem-vindes, todo mundo.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome everyone for this meeting. I'm Rafael Sampaio. I'm the director of BR Lab. I'm very happy to be here. Our first activity in BR Lab 2021, we actually will begin our agenda effectively next Monday with a live, with a panel, with Ana Andrade and our fellow partners to talk about discussions that are linked to the discussion topics of BR Lab. This panel is beginning a bit before because it starts one of the BR Lab
aliança com parceiros muito importantes.
Workshops, which is Locarno Industry Academy, and at the same time, it's part of the Spcine training program, and also a panel in partnership with Projeto Países, both institutions this year. The São Paulo Industry Academy, which is a workshop that is made with Locarno Cinema Festival that trains professionals, young people, exhibitors, sellers, and professionals that work at the end of the audiovisual chain. And we're very happy today to be able to bring, the first time in Brazil, a talk with Sibel Willow, who is the creator of Sunshine Cinema, a pioneering project in the world. It started in South Africa, This panel also is the start of the REACH program, which is a seminar created in 2019 in BR Lab in partnership with Projeto Paradiso, who was fundamental to create this seminar to discuss audience topics, consumption habits, and shed some light at this final moment of the movies. Reach's curatorship this year is very, very incredibly, and we're very honored to have as curator Thalita Arruda. And I'd like to thank everyone, all the team of BR Lab, Spcine, Projeto Paradiso, Cidel, Thalita Arruda, Melina Bonfim, who's also here to be our moderator, and also the team of the Industry Academy, and also Elias Ribeiro, who is from South Africa's Industry Academy. He's a Brazilian that coordinates the South African schedule. And when we assembled this agenda, it coincided with a panel that Sibel would do in South Africa. So Elias, he arranged all of this so that we will be able to have her today with us. I'm not going to extend myself that much, but I would like to invite all of you to continue tuned to BR Lab's schedule. It's already on our website. We will have 15 panels of several different topics, transversal topics, as everyone already knows. And I'd also like to invite Liara Oliveira, the director of Spcine, to also provide her opening. Thank you, Liara. Hi, everyone. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today in this partnership, really cool partnership with BR Lab, Projeto Paradiso. They are long-term partners of Spcine. Spcine, basically, since it began, when we started to foster events and projects, as of 2016, we already had this partnership with BR Lab, which already began way back with a partnership with the municipal culture department. So it's a pleasure for us to continue with this partnership, as Spcine believes a lot in training actions. So to keep the partnership with BR Lab is a very strategical decision, and we are trying to also emphasize more in Spcine's training activities. That's why we are in our training program, Spcine Invites, Spcine Convida, which is a way we found to organize our training activities, and we have had great feedback and continuing with partnerships that already started a few years ago and is now consolidating. And thinking of training toward audiovisual today is very strategic. The market of audiovisual production, we need more professionals that are increasingly skilled. When we think of globalization, of an open market that dialogues with international productions, this already happened before, and now, because we changed our professional practice the last year due to the pandemics and to new reflections and ways of thinking, of creating audiovisual. So we understand that this bottleneck of the training is even tighter because we have another portfolio to be able to meet. So in this sense, Spcine believes a lot in the training actions. So that's why we celebrate this partnership. We wish long life to the project and that BR Lab can expand. It's our first time, although our joint journey together, it's the first time Spcine is also investing funds, and that made a direct interlocution with Industry Academy, because we understand the the importance of going international and talking to other audiovisual creators, realizer, and listen, learn, receive, and make all these exchanges. So it used to be important, and from last year on, it became even more important, even more evident, and with more fostering, but also that also increases our challenges. We have more facilities, of course, but we have more challenges. Here we have our international guest today. That's fantastic because it raises our bar of international challenges. So I welcome and I thank all of you who are here today wanting to listen, learn, exchange, and we are transmitting on our YouTube channels with the original version of VR Lab and our translated version of Spcine YouTube channel. I invite all of you to participate all activities which will start next week, and keep in tune with the schedules and agendas of BR Lab and our Spcine agenda, and also Locarno Industry Academy agenda partnership with us. So Raquel do Vale, Director of Programming of Paradiso Project, now it's over to you, please. Thank you very much, Yara. Thank you, Rafael. For us, it's a huge honor, and we're very happy to be able to support once again VR Lab this edition, and especially, as Rafael said, supporting the Industry Academy with a great affection toward REACH, which began in 2019. I'm very happy to see Thalita Arruda participating this year. So I want to be brief. I share my thoughts of what Liara said about the training activities. For those that do not know us, Projeto Paradiso, we try to unite industry and arts. That's very dear to us. So I think that's the idea I had. So please celebrate VR Lab one more year. And everyone is here to listen to Sidel. So I think that was all I could say. Good afternoon, everyone. Great, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Liara. So I'm looking here at the masks, this live journey we're all in, and now to introduce a bit of REACH's schedule and agenda, and now passing on to Sibel and Thalita Arruda, and again like to stress your importance as Spcine to BR Lab and all the activities regarding training in audiovisual, and not many institutions have this look. So it's a very important work that you do and that you help us a lot in this. Thalita Arruda is also BR Lab's partner, long-term partner. This year is also, she's the creator of REACH. It's an honor to say that we have worked a lot throughout the years, and we have been always exchanging ideas. Thalita, over to you, and thank you. Hi, it's a great pleasure to be here opening the REACH program, whose provocation here is what we learned from the past. And also thank very much the entire team, Rafa, Projeto Paradiso, Spcine, Locarno. Partnerships are really important. We have to always emphasize them. Our audience today invite everyone to be able to be with us in REACH, because we want to think this year about audiovisual distribution in a more temporal interlocution, not think so much about the future as we usually do, but think of what we have already learned, all our practices, so that we can also understand as a strategy, what can we do from now on? What tools do we have to proceed from where we are and further on? And also mapping this history, I feel that some projects dialogue directly with Sunshine. I think Sidel will tell us also a lot about this, but I would like to emphasize Cine Solar, Sessão Vitrine, and Spcine's training, and several of the projects such as Taturana that also think a lot about strategizing and democratizing audiovisual in Brazil. And Sibel is a storyteller and the creator of Sunshine Cinema, which is the first mobile cinema driven by solar energy. She has a master in African studies and also studied anthropology. And Melina Bonfim, who will be our mediator, she is from Bahia and from Brasilia, and she has specialization in documentaries from Buenos Aires. She's a master's student in UNB, University of Brasilia, and a researcher and co-producer of festivals and exhibitions. And Melina is also involved in many other associations in our audiovisual market. So Melina, please, now it's over to you. Hi everyone, good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be with you guys. So many people to thank today. Today, this first moment is to celebrate all these meetings. Thank you, Thalita, Rafa Sampaio, BR Lab, Spcine, Projeto, Locarno Industry Academy, to make it possible for me to mediate this talk with Fidel and Thalita and cinema in Africa, South Africa. Fidel, I know you've just become a mother and you're still here with us, so thank you very, very much for that. I know it's difficult balancing all of this. So now that we are starting, let's talk a bit our organization today. Today's agenda, we're going to start with Fidel's MasterClass, which is going to last about half an hour. Then we'll talk a bit more, Fidel, myself, and Thalita. If you have any questions, please send them through the chat. Let's see if we can answer all of them, because there are several topics to cover. And so, Fidel, it's over to you, please. If you want, could you please start telling us how this wonderful project began, how you guys had this idea, and welcome to BR Lab. We have started, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's a great honor to be here with you. I wish that I could be there in person. I was very lucky to meet Thalita when we were both part of the Berlinale Talent Market Studio a couple of years ago, and I really enjoy and celebrate these kind of opportunities to share knowledge, particularly across the global South. I think that we have a lot of similarities in the issues of access and infrastructure that we face in our different spaces. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to learn from each other. I just wanted to share a brief deck with you that gives you a bit of background into what we do at Sunshine Cinema. Can you see my screen? You're able to see it? So Sunshine Cinema is a solar-powered mobile cinema network that was started in South Africa in 2017. We are not the first solar-powered cinema initiative in the world. There are many of them, such as the brilliant Project Cine Solar in Brazil, for example. But we are the first one doing this kind of work in Africa. So we started out of the basis that we come from a background of being storytellers and media makers, and we were frustrated with how much there was such a lack of reach for content that was locally made, because the internet is quite expensive in many parts of Southern Africa. There isn't a lot of infrastructure. Cell phone airtime is very expensive as well. So it's not that easy for people to watch content online on their phones or on Facebook or on video on demand platforms. So we took quite a DIY approach to distribution in building an alternative distribution platform using solar energy. And I just wanted to, I don't think I'm going to show this video. I can share the link afterwards. But essentially what we use is a solar-powered cinema that fits into a suitcase that we developed as an innovation. So it's called the Sunbox, and it is a complete mini cinema. And basically you can take this equipment and you can set up a cinema screening in a school, in a bar, in a tavern, in a church, in a community hall. There's blackout material, so you can host your screenings in the middle of the day. There's the solar generator, so you don't need electricity to plug into. And then there's a HD micro projector that allows you to screen the content. And we give this box over to the young people that we work with, who we hire as Sunbox ambassadors. And they have a catalog of around 50 different African films that they screen using this equipment in their communities over a period of a year to 2 years, depending on what funding is available for that project. So they essentially are setting up pop-up cinema clubs in their communities, and the screenings are free to the public. So these Sunbox ambassadors are young people coming from diverse parts of Southern Africa. South Africa has a really high unemployment rate amongst young people, and it's very difficult for a lot of people to access university education or even finish high school. So a lot of people in more rural parts of South Africa, not the big cities, don't have as much access to media and storytelling and that kind of industry opportunities. So we are trying to meet people where they are. Instead of saying, you need to travel to the big cities to find your opportunities, we specifically want to work with young people in rural areas through the model that we've developed. And they are trained in how to host screenings, how to use the equipment, how to take photos, how to make short video clips, how to do reporting about those screenings. They also create podcasts. So they are learning a lot of diverse digital marketing skills that they can then use at a later stage when they finish the ambassadorship to seek other forms of employment in the industries that they're interested in. And we currently have around 25 young people who work with us in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Malawi, and Zambia. Collectively, they are hosting 1 to 2 screenings a month. So they're doing about 20 screenings a month in total across the network. The Sunbox equipment is designed for screenings of 50 people. No more than that, because we want to keep those screenings quite intimate so that they can be engaging discussion that happens after the screenings. We don't cater for larger scale audiences with the Sunbox equipment, but on average they're reaching about 1,000 direct audience members a month through this approach. And we screen a wide variety of films, all coming from the African continent. So I don't know if it's similar in places like Brazil, but a lot of the incredible African films that get funding from the World Cinema Fund or end up at big film festivals like Berlinale, they don't get very long screening opportunities in traditional cinemas on the continent. And many of the traditional cinema spaces have closed down long before COVID, and many of the cinema spaces are multiplexes that tend to show international blockbusters more than they would show local homemade content. So we are trying to really focus on celebrating the wide berth of incredible quality local content that is out there that's not getting seen because of the lack of cinemas, or some of these films will go onto video on demand platforms in South Africa. So we have quite a big video on demand platform called Showmax, for example, that shows quite a number of these films. But the percentage of people who are at the level of middle class economic access to be able to afford to watch Showmax, to have internet at home, to have a computer, to have a smart TV is a small percentage in comparison to the broader population of the country. So with the Sandbox, what we're saying is that anywhere can become a screening venue. This is a screening that was happening in Malawi with one of the Sandbox ambassadors, using a school classroom for a women's group, focusing on films that were dealing with women farmers. We were working in a tea farming region of Malawi. So sometimes the screenings have more of an educational advocacy focus to them. Sometimes it's more of an entertainment-based initiative. It really depends on who our local partners are that we're working with and who we've been invited by to come into that space. These are some examples of screenings that have taken place more recently in Zimbabwe and Malawi following the COVID protocols in both countries. At the moment, actually, in Zimbabwe, we are not continuing screenings anymore because they are not allowing for public gatherings until everyone is fully vaccinated. But in Malawi, they did not experience such high rates of COVID, so they were able to continue with their more large-scale public screenings. And in Malawi, we have been working with participant media for the last 2 years in showcasing The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, because it's a Malawian story and it's in Chichewa, the language spoken across Malawi. It's been very well received in diverse rural parts of the country. And this year alone, the one Sandbox ambassador who's continuing to do screenings has done over 100 screenings of the film since the beginning of the year. And really what we're doing with this model of looking at youth and how can young people be introduced to the media industry as distributors, as impact facilitators, is we want to create employment opportunities. Because we come from countries where there are such high rates of unemployment, we want to celebrate the fact that there are a lot of young people who, even though they might not have a lot in an economic sense, are coming from a space of wanting to create change in their communities and wanting to have important conversations around gender-based violence, around education, around youth unemployment issues. So how can we use films to spark those conversations? How can we use films to be an action point that leads to broader community mobilization? So there's definitely an activism undercurrent to wanting to create these spaces of conversation that happen in these community settings, using film as the starting off point and as the platform for that engagement. So the program with the ambassadors is quite far-reaching. It's a full year program that they are part of. They're learning about screenings. They're learning how to produce podcasts. They're creating networks in their communities. They're running impact campaigns. They're building school cinema clubs. And all of that is under the auspices of that. After they finish with the program, we then try and assist them as much as we can to secure internships and apprenticeships in the broader film and media industry. And in a South African context, the film industry is a huge employment opportunity for many people because we are a country where a lot of international films get shot and a lot of commercials get shot, but we tend to be quite a service-driven country. So the high-end crew, the directors, the DOPs, the main producers won't be from South Africa. And we're trying to shift that in South Africa by saying, look at these incredible African films that are being made on the continent. There is a demand for them. There is an industry around them. We don't just have to be a service-driven industry. At the moment, we currently have around 21 young people who are working through our pilot program, which is a learnership. So beyond being Sandbox ambassadors, they are also completing a course through the University of Cape Town, where they are specifically learning about how to use media as an impact tool. It's a 6-month online course that we've developed with the University of Cape Town's Film and Media Department, and it looks at the impact ecosystem. It looks at how to build social movements. So some of the guest lecturers are activists from HIV activism in South Africa. Some of the guest lecturers are impact producers from Sierra Leone, from Kenya, from India, who have used documentary film to drive larger civil society engagements. And then also the main focus of the course is to really say that we can use media for impact, but there are certain skill sets and there's a certain toolkit that needs to be unpacked in order to build that impact campaign around a particular film that you might be working on. So it's the first course of its kind that we've developed with the University of Cape Town. And from 2022, it will be available to people to sign up and take the course. So it won't just be for our Sandbox ambassadors. It will actually be a commercial course that is available for people to do. I can share more information about that. And these are some of the guest lecturers that we have on board, such as Anita Khanna, who's a very well-known impact producer who developed the whole impact strategy around Miners Shot Down, which is a documentary film that unpacks what happened in South Africa in 2012 when a number of miners were killed for protesting the way that they were being treated and the lack of wage increase in the country. It was a hugely horrific event that happened in the country, probably one of the most violent that happened since the end of apartheid. And the film really showed the evidence of what the police were doing and how unjust it was, and was used as evidence. But of course, nothing has come from this process. As we all know, a lot of the time this happens. None of the miners have received any compensation. None of their families have received compensation. And I believe over 80 miners were killed by the police on that day. So films like that really have an activism centered to them, how to use them, how to engage civil society, how to engage government is really one of the key focuses of the course. And this just gives you a sense of the kind of environments that the Sandbox ambassadors are setting their screenings up in. So they will go out and they will choose venues that work for particular films. They will build partnerships with local organizations. So, for example, if we're showing a film that has a gender equality theme to it, who are the organizations working in that same area that we can invite to come on board to run a panel discussion after the screening to help the audience understand more about where networks of support can be found, who are the kind of organizations that can be useful for them. So it's also a space to share knowledge beyond just the film itself. And yeah, this has been quite a process for us to get to where we are now. We started with this nonprofit. We registered it as a separate nonprofit in 2017, and it's now 2021. So we've been operating as a separate nonprofit from our production company for the last 4 years. And this is the first year that we have been able to say we know that we have 3 years of funding ahead of us that will allow us to really map out where we want to be going with this program. Before that, it was all very much project by project based, which can make it very difficult to plan for the future and to plan for your long-term strategy. So we finally have gotten to a stage where we can say, these are the key things that we want to achieve by this time, and this is how we want to do them, and build our team to be able to do that. So it's a very exciting space for us at the moment. And I think that without the effects of COVID and the pause and the stop that created, we wouldn't have had the time to come up with ideas such as the course with UCT. We wouldn't have had the time to really think about and take stock of what we were doing. So in many ways, the pandemic has been somewhat of a blessing in disguise to allow us to really rethink our strategies of where we want to go with the program. I just wanted to end off with giving you a bit of an insight into some of the films that have been really well received in the past couple of months. We just started reintroducing screenings in South Africa because more and more of the population are getting vaccinated. So they have allowed for public gatherings to happen again at a 50% capacity. So at the moment, these are currently the films that in the last 2 months, the Sandbox ambassadors have been spending most of their time doing screenings of. Many of these films, as I said, are available on video on demand platforms for a more middle class or upper class audience. But for many of the areas where the Sandbox ambassadors work, most people have never had the opportunity to go to the cinema before. And none of these films are available on our standard television platforms in South Africa. So a lot of the time, actually, in recent months, and I think that it has a lot to do with the pandemic and the feeling that the economy is quite depressed, a lot more of the demand from the local audiences has been wanting to watch entertainment-based fictional films and not so much the documentary films. And I think that speaks to that underlying power of cinema, of being a space to escape and to really just switch off for a few hours and watch something that can take your mind away from some of your current realities and issues that you might be facing. So we're definitely seeing that the entertainment-based fictional films are far more popular at the moment. And that's us at the moment. You know, we have a broad-based list of partners and funders and sponsors that we couldn't do what we do without their support. It's quite wide-ranging, you know, from commercial brands such as Canon, who are helping us with some of the equipment in the Sandbox, to working with the Open Society Foundation on public health related screenings, to then doing screenings with participants focusing on celebrating African-made films like The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. So we really try and diversify our opportunities for funding in order to stay sustainable, because there isn't one magic funder that's going to just help us build African cinema distribution, as I'm sure it's the same in Brazil. We have to really try and hustle as much as possible to keep things going. And how we do that is through a wide range of approaches. On one hand, we're doing the Sandbox ambassadorship program, but we're also doing large-scale screenings with our cinema truck that are more based in the urban areas and in the cities. We're also creating content. We're selling the Sandboxes. We're running film workshops and trainings, and we're developing impact campaign strategies. And then at the same time, we are getting profits from people signing up for the UCT course, the University of Cape Town course. So we have quite a hybrid model in our approach and how we keep sustainable. And that's us. I would love to hear what questions you have for me and how we can think of these ideas across the global south.
Vamos eu e Thalita.
Thalita?
Uau, Cideli, muito obrigada.
Sidel, thank you very much for this presentation, which was very intense, although short. You're wonderful. Your work is incredible, wonderful. I have several questions, I believe, so does Thalita, but let's start from the beginning. I'd like to emphasize what you said. Here in Brazil, the Black youth also does not have much opportunities. So it's a bit like a mirror to us, what we see in your work. And thinking of the access to content and audiovisual and the possibilities of each time more Black people, youth, children have more access to this content. So I'd like to understand from you, how does this training happen? You talk a bit about this access with the Cape Town University, but the programming of the training with the ambassadors, because in practice, they probably also have content that is more towards curatorship, because thinking of a program for each one of the communities, they will propose that to the communities, and that's not simple. You talked a bit about the idea that it depends on the topic, and I think about the audience also, about the sunshine. Looking at some of the pictures of the sunshines, we have an audience that range from children to the elderly in the same exhibition. So do you have this type of programming also for an entire community and all ages and types? I'd like to know, so what I'd like to know is how this process happens of actually training the ambassadors to be able to provide that.
Sure. So we do a series of trainings with the ambassadors once they are selected. So we have open calls for young people to apply. In our last year, we received 3,000 applications for 20 slots in the program in South Africa. And the selected ambassadors were then all brought together in a workshop setting for a week in a part of South Africa quite close to Johannesburg, in nature. So it was almost like a retreat. And in that week, we focus on how to use the sandbox equipment, what are the kinds of films we are screening that they have access to, how to facilitate screening discussion, how to do reporting on those screenings, how to create videos and photos. So it's quite a jam-packed week. But we purposefully have quite a diverse catalog of films. So we have about 50 films at the moment in the catalog, all different age restrictions, different themes, that some are family friendly, some are more for an older audience, some are specifically for younger audiences. So we have quite a few animation films for younger audiences. And what happens often is we'll say to the Sandbox ambassador, you are the curator, you know your audience, you know the community that you come from, you know what people are going to want to enjoy. You must decide what you want to screen for so-and-so month. But let's say they want to try and screen a more hard-hitting documentary. What will happen is they'll set up the cinema and then all the kids will arrive because they'll see, you know, there's popcorn and they're excited and it's entertainment. So what they'll do is they'll show an animation or a kid-friendly film in the beginning. And then once the kids get bored, then they will move on and say, okay, now it's the time for the adult screening, go outside and play. So they have to work within the spaces that they are in, because as we know, you know, a community hall is used by so many different types of people at different times of the day. It doesn't have this European idea of the film starts at 7 o'clock and ends at 10 o'clock and the doors are closed. So we try and really work with that fluidity of how the spaces are created.
Maravilhoso. E eu acredito que isso para programação de uma forma geral, né?
That's wonderful, and I believe that for programming in general, there's a part for the exhibition and a part for the mediation, pre and post film. I also thought within this training, if you also talk a bit about the mediations that they can do, how to talk, how to mediate certain topics, invite the community, and also through multi-languages, such as the dancer in the community, the storyteller in the community, to open an exhibition, for example.
Yes, definitely. The whole reason why we do these screenings is that we want to spark conversation. So we want to get away from everyone being online, in their silo, in their echo chamber, and what does it mean to bring diverse viewpoints together in a room? How can we have conversation across difference? How can we disagree? It's okay to disagree on topics. What does that mean to disagree? How can we learn from that disagreement? So that is a big focus of the facilitation training that we do with the ambassadors.
E aí eu fiquei pensando pouco também.
And I also thought a bit, Sibeli, about dubbing. You talked about the languages, and I'm going to more specific questions, okay? So that we can fill in some gaps that we didn't have access to, and thinking more about the practical part. If they have a type of specific dubbing, because they have several languages in South Africa. If you could give us a bit of this context about the universal part of the languages in South Africa and how you bring this to the exhibitions.
So we have 11 official languages in South Africa, but they are grouped into certain root languages. So if you can speak one of the languages from that same group, you will be able to understand the other languages in that group. So if you speak Zulu, you'll be able to understand the basics of Swati and Xhosa. So when we're showing the films, we're thinking about that in terms of which regions the ambassadors are based in. So we try and have as much diversity in the local languages as possible. So we have quite a few films that are in Sotho. We have some films that are in Zulu, some films that are in Afrikaans, some films that are in Xhosa. But the dubbing aspect is something that we've only had funding to do on one film so far, because it was quite an expensive process, because we obviously wanted to do it really well and professionally so that the filmmakers would be happy with the material. And that has been an animation film that has been really well received because it's been dubbed into two of the main root languages. So it now is much more accessible to the broader country as a whole. But it is a challenge. It is something that we're always having to navigate. Quite a number of films are in English, and that can be quite that can create quite a disjuncture depending on the age group, depending on how rural you go with the films. Other films, like I was saying with The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, the fact that it's in Chichewa, the national language of Malawi, was really great to have access to a film like that, because there aren't many films that are in Chichewa, feature-length fictional films like that. So that's why when in some of those photos you see that there are hundreds and hundreds of people coming to those screenings, because there was such a demand and an interest based on the very fact that it was a local story told in the local language. So it becomes a huge challenge for us at times, trying to find as diverse a language pool as possible, because it's not like we don't have a lingua franca. We don't have one language in Southern Africa that everybody speaks, that everybody understands fluently. So it is a huge challenge.
Sim, compartilhamos esse desafio também, né?
Yes, we share this challenge with you. Films with Black protagonists for Black childhood and have access, because we know that dubbing is very expensive. We do know that. But, well, continuing with the strategies of Sunshine, thinking a bit the strategies of Sunshine, and I researched a bit and saw some pictures of some young people with speakers inviting people from the communities to see the exhibitions. So I believe that while they are preparing, while in this training, you also train the ambassadors to invite the community, this part of communicating with the public. I'd like to know a bit more how this happens. What are the strategies that are suggested for the audiences to actually feel that they are invited to the sessions and be invited to the sessions? Yes, and Sibel talked a bit about those that applied to the courses, and that very surprising for me in a positive way, knowing that more than 3,000 people applied and that it's growing, this network, that really opens my eyes. This training of, as you said, Sidel, they choose the films, and you actually aggregate and unite, and they participate both in the curator part and the communication part. And also within the line of Mel's question, the podcast, because where we research in your website, it's a very strong operation, the podcast, that goes beyond the films, beyond the exhibitions. So was that a strategy that is also a demand from the ambassadors themselves? How did you include this in the communication strategy which you have in conjunction with the ambassadors?
So the first question, in terms of how we're reaching the local audiences, it's through multiple approaches. So the loud hailers that you see with people walking around the village, calling people to the events is a really useful one, especially on the day of the screening, to remind people that this event is happening, it's free, come to this place at this time. In South Africa, people use WhatsApp a lot because it's very affordable. So we will make flyers of the screening events that the ambassadors then share on their WhatsApp status updates. So it's like Instagram stories, but it's on WhatsApp. And I find that a lot more people are using WhatsApp status updates in comparison to Instagram in the context of where we're working, because Instagram uses so much data, because a lot of the time data is the big issue. South Africa has very, very expensive data costs. So to be able to sit on TikTok or Instagram is not necessarily what most people can afford. They also print the flyers and stick them up in community shops and schools and notice boards to let people know. We create Facebook events for the screenings. We do WhatsApp broadcasts to different groups. We invite partner organizations to come to those events. So it's multiple strategies to try and get the audiences to come. Not always successful, always learning. You know, there might be protest that blocks the way for people to get to the venue on that day, or the ambassador might have booked a venue and then find that a local political leader has decided that they're going to give a speech that day at that venue, and all of a sudden the venue is not available anymore. So things are always shifting and changing. So we just try and employ as many different approaches as possible in that context. And then the podcasts. The podcast actually developed out of the pandemic, because when we first, in February last year, we had just secured funding to start new Sandbox programs in Zimbabwe, Malawi, and South Africa. And then the pandemic hit and everything shut down in March. And basically none of the Sandbox ambassadors who had just been trained and had just been given their boxes and their cinemas could host screenings. So we went back to the funders and said, we've talked to the ambassadors and we think that developing podcasts for the moment will be a way of them still engaging their communities and sparking conversation, having facilitated discussion around themes that they would have had in the film screenings, but take away the film screening and just have the discussion. So that was where the idea for the SunCloud came out. It came out of necessity to keep the momentum going and keep the young people learning new skills and engaging. But it's become its own beast, because they are still producing podcasts, even though they're doing the screenings. But I would say that the podcasts are challenging to get reach, because they are shared on WhatsApp, they go online, but again, it's that online access that is still challenging. but we've been very blessed to have this relationship with the University of Cape Town, and they developed a platform that doesn't use any data for resources. So you can upload the podcast to this website, but you don't actually need any cell phone minutes on your phone to be able to listen to it. You just need to be near a cell phone tower to connect to the signal. So that's one way that the podcasts are still getting reach. But the communication strategy is always evolving, and really what we try and premise it on is listening to the Sandbox ambassadors, because they are the grassroots facilitators. They're the ones on the ground. They're the ones who know the dynamics in the context of where they work. We sit in an urban setting in positions of privilege and positions of power. We don't know the same realities that they might face in what it means to access content and information.
Maravilhoso, Sibeli.
Wonderful, Sidel. And what you said that you are the ones that you always listen to, that's fundamental. And I thought a bit about this systematization of their impressions post exhibitions. What do they bring to these sessions from their own experience, these ambassadors, and understand a bit about the base team, the grassroots team that is everywhere. For example, in Bahia State, this link with universities seems incredible. So thinking about the University of Recôncavo Baiano, which is the blackest university in Brazil, and think of PPG-Com, which is the communication program of this university, we're talking about inhabiting the empty spaces and how to do that in the highways. And we only know what happens when we're actually moving, in movement, as you said, because it's the ambassadors. And I'd like to know if you have like a base team, such as the drivers, production team. Who are these people that are coming and going all the time to these communities? Is it you and a group of people that organize this conversation with the university? Just to understand a bit more, who is this base team? What is this base team composed of?
So in terms of the team who run the whole thing, there's about 7 of us in Cape Town who run the network. We have an incredible small group of very passionate, hardworking individuals who really are behind this idea of celebrating alternative distribution, that have come on board for this crazy ride. And the ambassadors themselves, the young people, are selected from diverse rural parts of the country, and they are the ones running their screenings. So we have face-to-face interaction with them once or twice a year, depending on what funding we have available to come together. But the rest of the time, our facilitation of the logistics and supporting them is all done online. It's all done through phone calls and WhatsApp and online support. And they themselves are the ones going out with their box, securing the venues, organizing, setting up, and then we are the ones supporting them from afar.
Perfect. And then you have like a feedback of what that happened in each one of these places. Do they provide you feedback so that you can also address the difficulties they had in a more broad way also?
Yes, so we have feedback sessions twice a month relating to the screenings. We also have feedback sessions relating to the course the UCT course and challenges that they might be facing, whether it's not submitting assignments because of internet access or electricity issues or whatever the challenges are. And they submit screening reports to us after each screening that are full of information around what the audience had to say about a particular film, what worked about it, what didn't work about it, what they would like to see in the future. So there's a continuous feedback loop that's coming through. So there's a lot of data.
Thalita quer perguntar.
Thalita, would you like to ask something? Yes, actually, it's a question from the chat from Halfi. He's asking how, especially by the young people and the children, how have they received this project, and how are the children's films received? I think what he's asking here is if the ambassadors also make films and if they are in the catalog of Sunshine. And a question I have that I'm very curious about, you said you have a catalog today. How did you bring these numbers? How did you, of the audience today, the way how you were able to gather these figures about the audience? That's very good as a feedback to know what works, what doesn't work, and how do you actually select the films? You say that you have an exchange, tight exchange with ambassadors, but what about the dialogue and the exchange with the realizers, with the filmmakers that contribute with the project?
So we don't show films that the ambassadors make on the sandboxes yet. We don't have the capacity to really focus on film production training at the moment. We're focusing on facilitation and distribution. It is something that we would like to look into in the future, because some of the ambassadors are interested in getting more into the film production side of the work. But there are so many initiatives already dealing with the film production side, so we're more looking at like how we can collaborate with those partners. The content that is related to children, the animations and the kid-friendly content, is extremely well received. It's probably some of the most popular content, and the feedback that we get from those screenings is often that the young people are very excited to see characters that look like them, that come from situations like them, that they can relate to, that give them hope, that give them aspiration, that are inspiring. So there's a lot of that kind of feedback that comes from those screenings. And the curation of the films has been a process of building relationships with the filmmakers, with sales agents, with distributors, and negotiating educational license fees for films, because we don't charge entrance for the films. A lot of the films have been very supportive of the model because they see the lack of access to their content on the continent. So they have been very supportive from the very beginning of the program, and we wouldn't be able to do the work without their trust and their support, because without the films we have, yellow boxes. And the way that we feed back to them is to provide them with like a yearly report of how many times we screened a film, how it was received, where we screened it, what was the kind of audience. So they are getting that data back from us as a token of thanks from us. And we always try and share as much of the photos and the videos from their screenings as possible. But we do focus sometimes on specific screening campaigns with a film for a longer period of time. So the example of The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, that's one film that's being screened continuously over a set period. There aren't any other films that are being screened alongside it.
Fiquei pensando sobre a participação desses realizadores nessas
I thought about the participation of these filmmakers in these exhibitions. This hasn't happened yet, right? Them themselves, the filmmakers themselves, going to the exhibitions in places that are a bit more far away from Johannesburg or Cape Town.
We have tried to do that. As once or twice we've had the money to make that happen, but it is definitely something we would love to do more of, because it's so exciting to be able to have the filmmaker in the room giving feedback to the audience directly. It really brings that post-screening discussion alive, and it's definitely something that we've only really managed to do in urban context because of the cost of travel. But it's a huge thing that we would love to do more of. It would be amazing.
Thalita, temos mais perguntas do chat?
Thalita, any more questions from the chat?
A gente não está te ouvindo.
We can't hear you, Thalita.
Perdão.
Sorry.
Não, acho que
Rafa talked a bit about what Sidel said, and also about the activities of workshops and more related to this experience. But from the chat, we have no more questions. I have a question. Where did I write it down? Just a minute. I have to find my question.
Sidel, enquanto a Thalita procura...
Sidel, while Thalita searches for her question, just to share with you that in practice, there is
uma possibilidade de ampliação.
the possibility of expanding imaginations and conversations that is very important in this entire work that Sunshine is promoting, because as you said, many of these people do not have access to traditional communication means or the blockbuster films or internet itself or on-demand films, as you said. So it's a way of expanding the access to storytelling narratives that would not happen if these films were not reaching these places, these audiences. So I wanted to listen more about these accounts that you have on how these impacted the lives of these audiences, how they received and transformed their lives. I believe that you also have the feedback from the ambassadors, what they report to you guys, not just at the moment of the program, but also from that on, you try to transform this ambassador in an audiovisual professional to follow their own paths and based on their own desires. So I'm just curious if you could, I'd just like to tell you how beautiful your work is in this sense.
Thank you so much. I think that a big takeaway for me with what the feedback from ambassadors who've been through the program for, let's say, 12 months, when you sit with them and ask them, how has this been for you? A huge thing that comes back is that they feel a lot more confident in themselves. And I think that that's largely to do with the bravery of coming and being able to stand in front of people and talk to people. And even though you're a young person, your voice matters and you can speak to be heard. I think that that's something that maybe some young people don't realize, that they have that power within them, that they can create their own experience, their own possibilities if they are given the skills and opportunities. So that confidence building is something that might seem like a soft skill, but actually it's such a huge thing, because it then can give you that ability to go out there and stand your ground and stand firmly in yourself and who you are, especially in a country like South Africa, where we've had such a long history of racial injustice and so much degradation of people's souls, and people's beings and identities have been stripped away by disgusting supremacist ways of being. So the fact that young people coming from those contexts can hold their space and hold their own is something really powerful that we want to continue. And secondly, a lot of the feedback from audiences has been around this idea of, I relate to these people in the film. They are speaking my language. They are coming from a context that is familiar to me. It is their story is my story, and the way that they've navigated their experience is something that has taught me something today, or is something that I might disagree with, but you're still learning through that disagreement process. So I think that familiarity of seeing someone like yourself on screen is a really powerful tool when we think about the history of the colonial empire in a place like Africa, and how representation has had such a dark history on this continent, and why it's so important for more voices from this continent to speak back to themselves. Because if you just continue in this way of having funding from the global north to have a film go to film festivals in Venice or go to Berlinale or Toronto, but never actually show them on the continent, then it's another form of colonialism, because you're just extracting the creative content like you would have extracted the gold before. You know, it's not, the circle is not complete. So in that essence, that keeps our fire burning.
Maravilhoso. E a herança.
Amazing, wonderful. And the inheritance that we have is the creation of dialogue. Writes it down, because regardless of one or two films reaching a community, beyond that is the possibility of gathering and talking about issues and disagreeing by watching, or agreeing by watching. That's an inheritance that exists, and a dialogue that will never be lost again. And just to add also the importance of, when we think about a dialogue with the audiences, this exercise of giving back the films to their audiences. I think that's the main challenge that we share. We have this in Brazil also, Brazil's reality, and how we can have overcome this challenge. And I think it's how diligent and how careful you are when you select the ambassadors, train the ambassadors, how to create this network that does not depend on the internet, because in many places we cannot access through the internet, and how to provide this environment for discussions and agreements and disagreements. So strategies that are thinking of democratization, and that the film will go to another place, but then it will come back to their own places. And also I like to stress how careful you are in the exhibitions themselves. For example, we see the lights that are a bit more yellow, that are a bit more mild, that make the environment very welcoming for the people that are there after the exhibitions.
Was there a question in there?
Era uma pergunta? Tem uma pergunta?
Mas tem acho que a gente pode ir caminhando para...
But I think we can conclude, but I would just like to make another question that has just showed up, specifically about the boy that harnessed the wind circuit. And also a last question, if you find difficulties in acquiring ownership on the exhibition of the films that were produced.
Espero que eu tenha correspondido à pergunta.
I don't know, I tried to join both questions together. I don't know if that was clear.
I think I sort of get it. The ownership of the licenses for the films, we don't own the licenses. We pay for educational licenses for a set period of time because we're not charging entrance for the screenings. So we'll pay a set fee of 100 euros or 200 euros for a title, and then we'll be allowed to screen that film in a certain place for 12 months, a number of times. So we negotiate those license deals with the different distributors and sometimes directly with the filmmaker. The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind is a more challenging title because it is a Netflix production. So Netflix is a bit harder to navigate, but we were commissioned by Participant Media, who made the film, to take it on the road and run an impact campaign. So they funded the impact campaign. So they negotiated with Netflix. We didn't have any dealings with Netflix directly in distributing the film, but we obviously weren't allowed to charge entrance for the film, weren't allowed to share the film with third parties, anything like that. So there were very strict rules attached to how we accessed that film. But it was very exciting in terms of an opportunity to have a Hollywood studio that was willing to pay for an impact campaign. I don't think there is another Hollywood studio that does that kind of work in the distribution space, to my knowledge. And I think that, sorry, just to add, I think that that's largely due to the way the film was made, because the actual person, the boy who harnessed the wind, William Kamkwamba, was very involved in the development and script and the whole process of the film, and runs an educational science innovation center in Malawi, and really wanted to push for the film going back to Malawi. So he had a huge role in that narrative because it is his story. It's a film about him.
Maravilhoso, Sideli. Bom, são 4.
Wonderful, Sidel. So it's 4:24 p.m. We discussed many things. Is there anything we didn't ask you that you would like to talk about? And maybe that's my last question.
There was nothing that comes to mind. I just really wanted to thank you for this opportunity. I've always been really interested in ideas of collaboration across the global south between spaces like South Africa and Brazil and India. I think there's a lot of similarities in many ways, and then there's unique differences. But across those areas, I think that there's opportunities for very interesting, creative solutions that can be found. And the more these kinds of conversations and spaces exist, that really gives me energy, to keep these machines going, because as we all know in this space, sometimes it can be very difficult to stay motivated, and it's not always easy. It is a challenging space to work in because there are many challenges, but there are also opportunities for solutions and collaboration. So thank you for filling my cup with some fire.
Muito obrigada a você também, enfim, Mel.
Thank you, Sidel. Thank you, Mel, and everyone that participated today. And I hope that I share a lot with your view. I think these exchanges strengthen us. Especially, I'd like to thank you because I know that you had to balance your day today to be here with us, and I think we can dialogue with the project with Brazilian films and think of partnerships and make it reflect in other instances.
Muito
Mel.
obrigada, Cideli. Obrigada
Thank you very much, Sidel, and everyone. It's a huge network for this talk to be able to happen today. I'm very happy that it worked out fine. A better future for all childhoods and youths that I think we all wish here.
Precisamos cuidar
there and in the entire planet. We have to take care of the planet, and social impact, environmental impact actions are very fundamental, thinking about the past, the present, and the future, as Thalita proposes as a curator this year. Thank you very much, Sidel, the audience, everyone who participated. Have a wonderful afternoon, and BR Lab is only beginning. Bye-bye.